looking to win some money on Monday night. And let me tell you something, this slate is pretty tricky, but I'm here to help with that. These are the must-have players for Monday night. Starting at $8,200, Jeff Wilson, the starting running back for the 49ers. And yes, indeed, he's the starting running back. He played 71% of the snaps in the last game, and when you factor in his carries of 12 and his targets, he sees 15 overall opportunities, a solid game of 100+ total yards for the second straight outing. But here's the key part of all of this. Yes, he's the main back here, but a lot of times the 49ers use multiple running backs, but not week 3. Jordan Mason, the undrafted free agent who wasn't even on the active roster week 1, was a clear backup the second week. Week 3, also a clear backup, just 5 total snaps. Now, it is true that this is going to be a brutal matchup for Wilson. The Rams rank 2nd in run defense so far this season, but here's the good news, and it's a quietly good news for Jeff Wilson. The Rams are about average in tackling. 13th in the NFL right now, puts them middle of the pack. Here's why that's important. Jeff Wilson, basically across 1.5 to 2 starts, right? Week 1, Elijah Mitchell was active for part of the game, has 18 broken tackles. Top 10 in the NFL, again, on somewhat limited usage, so this is a good spot for him to earn his own yards. So expect a lot of yards after contact, which is the name of the game for Jeff Wilson anyways. And because of that, I actually took his over 56.5 rushing yard prop. As of this recording, we're 31-13 on the season in player props, so if you would like to take this with a free bet up to $100, just click the link in the description below to prizepicks.com. Your first bet is matched for free up to $100. All right, now let's talk about an elite player who's back on the field. And that would be $6,600 George Kittle, who in my opinion is far too cheap. He returned last week, and this is what he did. He ended up playing an elite 98% of the snaps. He ran 22 routes in that game. It led to 5 targets. Wasn't anything crazy, just 4 catches, 28 yards, but it was good to see. He wasn't limited by any means, and you can tell by the 98% of the snaps in a difficult matchup. Now, he only did see 15 air yards, so we didn't get much downfield usage in this game, but it's a small one-game sample. He's used to blocking and then releasing, so he doesn't get downfield anyways. He relies on his yards after the catch. And like we said about Jeff Wilson, this Rams team is not the greatest in tackling, so that's going to help Kittle. And Kittle's in a somewhat decent matchup. Let's discuss. He'll be facing Ernest Jones, who's actually been pretty good through 3 games so far, but he does allow tight ends to catch passes. He's good at tackling, but he allows them to catch passes 80% of the time, and Kittle's superpower, if anything, is being able to break tackles and get yards after the catch. At this price point of just $6,600, he's one of the best plays on the slate. And tight ends being strong plays is a theme on this slate because Rams tight end Tyler Higby is dirt cheap somehow at $5,200. It makes no sense. Now, in this last game, he only ends up running 18 routes, but they only threw the ball, surprisingly, Matt Stafford 25 times, so it's still a good participation on those routes in terms of how many he was running versus the dropbacks, and the snaps are good here, 90+%, so everything's kind of fine for Tyler Higby, yet his price drops a lot. And expect Stafford to throw more than 25 times in this game, so Higby should see 5 to 6+ targets. And he's quietly seen elite usage. He is a top 3 opportunity usage, whatever you want to say, production tight end through the first 3 weeks with 24 targets and a 24% target rate. So consider Higby a must. Now let's discuss some of these high-end plays. Now there's 4 guys above $10,000 on this slate, and to rank them, it's right away in his own tier, Cooper Kupp. I know he's the most expensive. I know he's over $1,000 more than anybody else, but he is clearly the best play up here and probably on the slate. You don't need me to tell you that he has the safest floor and the highest ceiling on the slate. Just look what he's done in 20 career games with Stafford. He's averaged 11.9 targets per game, over 111 receiving yards per game, and an insane 26.2 fantasy points per game. 16 touchdowns in 20 games with the Rams and Stafford. Now, the Rams do actually rank number 1 in secondary coverage, so it'll be a somewhat challenging matchup for Cooper Kupp in this one, but let's break it down on an individual basis. When you actually break it down on an individual basis, when he's in the slot most of the time versus Lenore, it's going to be a solid matchup. Lenore right now is a little bit undersized, allows a 71% catch rate, and according to Pro Football Focus, every single one of his one-on-one matchups, when he'll see a little bit of Ward and Mosley on the outside, also positive for Cooper Kupp. So no worries here in terms of matchup. Kupp is my highest projected play in the slate by nearly 5 points. If you want to see all the projections, the ownership, use the lineup optimizer, and more for this slate, check out my Patreon with the thousands of other people using these key DFS tools. You can learn more with the link in the description. All right, so after Cooper Kupp, these 10,000 plus range, I'm going to lean to go to Deebo Samuel over Matthew Stafford. I want Deebo's ceiling more than I want Stafford's floor of like 12 to 14 points. Because right now, Stafford's only averaging 13.9 points per game and doesn't look nearly the same as he did last year. Now, part of this might be his shoulder, part of it might be no Robert Woods, but the big thing is the offensive line. They lost Andrew Whitworth, and their offensive line ranks 31st in protection rate right now. It's hurting Stafford's ability to find guys downfield. So I'd rather go to Deebo Samuel, is actually cheaper, but honestly, just go to Cooper Kupp and just skip this entire range. But if you had to choose here, maybe you want to get away from Cooper Kupp or get the 2 of them, it would be Deebo. Because the dude's still earning an elite target share. 29% target share is top 12 in the NFL. If you take out the guys who have only seen a couple of routes run this year, it's actually top 10 in the NFL. And you're starting to see something interesting happen. They're treating Jeff Wilson as a true running back. Last week in his first game with Jimmy G, Deebo operated as mainly a wide receiver. 90% of the snaps. 26 routes were a season high, which led to, 8 targets, and one of those was in the red zone. A very nice game for Deebo. He was operating as a true receiver, which makes it higher upside, if you will, for his overall price point here. And now Deebo is being used in the same ways as last year. He's not being targeted downfield. He ranks 76th in yards per target, meaning his targets on average are nowhere near deep. On average, they are 6 yards. And this means he'll have to win after the catch to have a lot of upside. Now, this has always been the case with Deebo, and yet again it is this year, where he ranks top 8 right now amongst all wide receivers with 103 yards after the catch, so he's clicking on all cylinders basically. Now let's talk about these quarterbacks. We talked a little bit about Stafford, but if I had to choose between Stafford and Jimmy G, I'm shocked they're only $600 apart. I know Stafford has had a rough start to the season, but Jimmy G has always lacked true upside, and he didn't look all that great last week in terms of a ceiling. So I want to take Stafford's overall experience in his offense, his head coach and offensive coordinator in terms of just passing downfield, and oh yeah, his arm. Now Jimmy G, as always, was efficient last week, but he wasn't all that effective because he did complete 62% of his passes in his first start. He did average 7.3 yards per attempt, which is slightly above league average. The problem is he barely breaks 200 yards. He didn't throw downfield all that much, and he has 9.4 fantasy points. He doesn't have the mobile upside. He's not threatening downfield. This team loves to run the ball in the red zone, so it really limits the upside here. Jimmy G could potentially be a sleeper for some people on this slate, but it's just not getting there based on the pricing. And speaking of getting there based on the pricing, let's talk about the major values on this slate. And we could start near the bottom of the slate at just $1,000 as Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback, but he's been playing on a lot of third downs the last couple of weeks in passing situations. Now last week specifically, he actually played the 5th most passing snaps on the team. He played 20 passing snaps, which led to a 24-yard reception on 1 target. But if he's going to be out there running 15 routes like he was last week, you can see right here he ran 15 routes on 20 passing plays. That's pretty damn solid. At just $1,000, it puts him in play. He's probably not going to win you your week. At best, you get 2 catches, maybe 20, 30 yards, but he allows you to fit in the combination of maybe a Deebo and a Kupp if you want to build one of those lineups. Now, I actually took Juszczyk over 2.5 receiving yards when this prop first launched. I love that. 15 routes, I'll take that all day. It's just 1 screen to him and 1 dump off. It's now up to 6.5, but I'll still take it here. I have him projected for about 11 yards in this game. Again, you could take this with the free bet linked in the description below on prizepicks.com when you use the code SAL22. Use it or lose it. Take advantage of this offer in the description. Now let's talk about a value wide receiver, and that would be Juwan Jennings, who's a solid value this week at just $2,000. He is the clear wide receiver 3 on the 49ers. Now his snaps have dropped from 64 to 49 to 42, but it's nothing major because the routes have stayed pretty good. 19, 11, and 14. He's averaging 15 routes a week, so when he's out there, he's running a route, which means it could lead to targets. He's seen at least 2 targets every week. He's seen a reception every week. For $2,000, if you're going to get a wide receiver running 15 routes with the upside of seeing 3 or 4 or even a 6 target game this year, it's solid. And the other side of this is he's a big athletic wide receiver with a good catch radius. 6'3", 215 pounds with those types of skills is great for the red zone. If you're only seeing 1 target, but it's in the red zone, and you catch a 5-yard pass for a touchdown, you're clearly paying off this price tag. So if you want to play Kupp and maybe Kupp in another $10,000 player, you're probably going to need a Jennings or a Juszczyk type guy. Now let's talk about the guys I'll call the rest. They're not major values, they're not super expensive, but they're just the rest. And we can start with $7,600 Brandon Aiyuk, who, look, he's been strong so far this season. On the year right now, he's running as the #1 wide receiver so far this season, actually ahead of right now Deebo Samuel, running more routes than him. It's led to back-to-back games with a red zone target and 8 overall targets. Finally found the end zone last week, and oh yeah, 122 air yards. He's being used downfield. This is what they did last year with him. They did this in all of camp in the preseason reports, and now it's coming to life in the regular season. And seeing air yards means you're getting more explosive play opportunities. And more proof that he's operating as a #1 receiver right now is the way that other teams are playing him. Jalen Johnson from the Bears is by far their #1 cornerback. Patrick Surtain is one of the best cornerbacks and a young one in the NFL right now. They're putting these guys on Brandon Aiyuk, not Deebo Samuel. Now, in terms of his pricing at $7,600, I do prefer Jeff Wilson. I do prefer George Kittle for cheaper, and even Tyler Higby for a lot cheaper. That's the only reason why he's not one of the featured plays that we're talking about. He's in play. He's fine if he makes your lineup. He's just not a priority. And now this next wide receiver is not a priority at all. I don't really want to play him. And that would be $6,200 Allen Robinson, who I will admit is a really nice price point this week, but there's a lot of concerns. The first one is this matchup. The 49ers have allowed the second fewest receptions to wide receivers. They've been pretty sticky in coverage, and Allen Robinson in coverage this year ranks 70th amongst wide receivers at getting separation and earning targets, which is the complete opposite of what we saw last year as a top 20 receiver. He's kind of fallen off the cliff. It is a small 3-game sample, but this is concerning. And even more concerning is that he has just a 13% target rate, 93rd amongst all wide receivers at earning targets this year, and this is coming from Matthew Stafford, who's trying to find him when there's double teams on Cooper Kupp. This is a concern. Now at $6,200, he's not completely out of play, and honestly, at this price point, a touchdown might get him there alone, but I just prefer George Kittle and Tyler Higby, the 2 guys around him, the tight ends around him, a lot more on this slate. Now there is one more Rams wide receiver we need to discuss, and that would be $4,400 Ben Skowronek, who right now is seeing really good usage. He's ran a route on almost every single one of Stafford's dropbacks. He's playing 85% of the snaps or so, and it's leading to nice volume. 10.6 fantasy points last week, 66 receiving yards. It got the over for us. I think it was set at 25-26.5. So this is good usage for the guy, but the problem is his price point has now come up. He's not being used downfield. He's a bigger body, so he might have touchdown upside here. But a lot of the things we're saying for Ben Skowronek, we just said for Juwan Johnson, and he's half the price. So I'll lean Juwan Johnson there, and now we need to discuss the Rams backfield, because Daryl Henderson and Cam Akers are side by side in the pricing, with Akers being $200 more this week. And these dudes have a tough matchup. San Francisco is tough. They're top 5 in run defense on the year, and here's what you've seen so far from these two guys. Last week, you saw Cam Akers start to get used a lot more, but then he fumbled on the goal line. This ended up leading to him actually playing 2 less snaps than Daryl Henderson last week, and here's the breakdown. Henderson runs 15 routes, as you can see right here, to Cam Akers just 5. So he's the passing down back, he's the 2-minute drill back, and then though, 11 carries for Cam Akers to just 4 for Henderson. So the early down back, the grinder there, is Cam Akers. This basically means that Akers probably has more touchdown upside, but you're going to get Henderson with the 3 or 4 reception type upside. And truthfully, at these price points, I'd rather go up to Jeff Wilson. I'd rather play Brandon Aiyuk, either George Kittle, all these other guys at this point. I'd even rather go to Allen Robinson, who's a little bit cheaper. And I've also taken Cam Akers under 9.5 receiving yards, just 5 routes run last week. If we see anywhere near that usage again, he's only running 7 or 8 routes. At best, you're getting 1 target. Let's hope it doesn't go for 10 plus yards. Now, one more thing on the quarterbacks is that I don't think you need to play either of them this week. Neither of them project out as fantastic plays. You can get away with playing just Cooper Kupp or Cooper Kupp and Deebo and going down. Most of the time, I want to play at least one. I don't think they're not in play, but I don't think you actually need a quarterback this week. And based on how this slate is priced, I don't think you need a kicker or a defense, but I will say all 4 of them grade out pretty dang good on this slate. I do prefer the kickers. There's 2 kickers here whose coaches, especially in the first half, will settle for deeper field goals. They're both good at kicking 50-plus yard field goals, experienced, solid scoring offenses. So these are 2 kickers that I'll be happy to play this week. I prefer them slightly over the defenses. All 4 are in play, but because we have a Kyle Juszczyk, we have a Juwan Johnson, we have a Ben Skowronek, and also a Tyler Higby, not that expensive, these dudes are nowhere near as in play as maybe like last Thursday's slate when you needed them. So there's some of your best plays and some of your guys to be hesitant on. We'll be live on this channel right here Monday night before the game starts, so be sure to subscribe so you know when we're going live. And be sure to join Patreon to get the ownership projections, point projections, the lineup optimizer, and a whole lot more with 1,000+ other members right now in the community. It's linked in the description below.